everybody. Welcome to another live stream with Montana Outdoor Science School. My name is Melanie, and today's topic is once again about skulls, but very specifically, we're going to get into the difference between herbivore skulls and carnivore skulls. Before I get too far, I do want to say most of what I'm talking about today is going to carry over with mammal skulls. It might not necessarily be true for other types of skulls such as birds or reptiles. So just know that the information I'm going to be giving you guys is mostly to do with mammal skulls. Let me talk about Moss a little bit too. Moss is an organization. We try to get kids excited and interested and curious about science and in nature. We do a variety of activities through our school programs. We either visit classrooms or they come visit us. And we also hold summer camps during the summertime. We do science demonstrations, activities, we go on field trips, we do all kinds of things to try to get kids excited. So while we're all indoors for coronavirus, we are trying to put out live feeds and YouTube videos for folks to be able to still be participating with Moss. Our YouTube channel is, of course, with Montana Outdoor Science School. We're putting out some videos called Nature Nuggets in the Neighborhood, just little fun tidbits of knowledge that you can utilize when you go on walks around your area. We're also doing nature journaling with Moss. Those are activities that you could be doing in your house and even in your backyard. But without further ado, let me get started. We do live streams every Wednesday at 11 and every Friday at 11, so feel free to tune in then. If you do have any questions, please feel free to type. We always have someone available and ready to try to answer those questions. If I don't see the questions and read them aloud, there should be somebody there to help us out and get you the questions answered that you're looking for. So let me go ahead and talk about the item I have in front of me. This is a wolf specimen. This is not, however, a real wolf skull. It is a cast of a very real skull, however. So at one point, there really was a wolf. It was alive. It died. They had a wolf skull. They made a cast out of it. So this is actually made out of plastic. It's a great educational tool. We have several other ones at Moss that range from really large skulls to some small ones from foxes as well. But let me talk about the wolf skull here. It's a great ideal specimen for talking about carnivore skulls in general. There's a few different ways that you can tell a carnivore skull is a carnivore. The biggest thing that kids always notice is, of course, these great big canines. If you remember last time, we talked about all kinds of teeth. Canines are one of the teeth that mammals have. We even have canines in our mouth. There's also incisors, which are those scissor-like teeth in the front. There's premolars, which are the really little teeth just behind the canine tooth. And then there's also regular molars sitting back here. Let's start with teeth first when talking about carnivore skulls. I'm going to bring the camera a little bit closer so y'all can take a look at this. All right, so of course the canine teeth end up being much larger. That's always easy to see. But on the incisors area, there's also some sharpness to those as well. They end up not being quite as scissor-like as, say, in an herbivore skull. In the premolars, your premolars can end up looking very different across the board from your molars, but they're often smaller, and again, in carnivores, they're a lot sharper. If we did a little side view here, you can see they're almost like great big mountains with how pointy they are, and the same thing occurs with the molars as well. Again, really pointy. They still use them to grind food down, but they're not quite as necessary as in the herbivore. Herbivores do a lot of chewing, they do a lot of grinding of their food. Carnivores do not do quite as much of that, so therefore they don't need these molars to be really flat. They just need them to be able to tear apart the meat that they're eating. So that is the teeth. And I should also mention too, I was pointing at everything on the top jaw area. Everything is true for the bottom jaw area as well. Again, we have those great big canines. The incisors on this specimen have unfortunately broke, but if we did have them still, you'd be able to see that they were a little sharper, more pointed, not quite scissor-like the way herbivore skulls are. And then these premolars here are again sharp, and as well as the molars back here are sharp too. So that's something to note. Something else to note about carnivore skulls is the eye placement on them. We talked last time about how the eyes on any skull are going to be these sockets here, and sometimes it's hard to tell when you receive a specimen because you see all this big open area here, and sometimes kids point and they say, this is where the eye goes, and it's actually this area right here. Everything else I've got covered up is not where the eye socket is. The eye sockets are right there, and you can see on the wolf skull these two bones don't connect. I don't know if that's true necessarily for all carnivore skulls, but I just want to point that out. Some skulls, you'll see this connect here. On a lot of carnivores, I think it doesn't always connect, but that's not true across the board. However, the placement of where the eye socket is important. We have a saying at Moss, if the eyes are in the front, it likes to hunt. And so if you look at this wolf skull, you can see the eye socket, the majority of it points forward towards the camera right here. And that's true for a lot of predators. For most carnivores, the eye sockets will be facing forward. Eyes in the front likes to hunt. Just the opposite of that, if the eyes end up being pointing out to the side, that is an animal that likes to hide, is what we say. You could guess why a carnivore has its eyes pointing forward. Especially with wolves, them being pack animals, them being animals that need to pursue something, they want to be looking forward. They're not nearly as worried about being able to see behind them, since they are a top predator in an ecosystem. So that's part of the reason why eyes face forward. It gives them also a better vision. We as humans, and oftentimes a lot of animals that have their eyes facing forward, have what is called binocular vision. It means that since our eyes are set apart in two different places, if we look at an object, say this wolf was looking at my finger, he can better gauge the distance of that thing in front of him. Versus herbivores, since their eyes aren't facing forward, they're facing out to the side, they have, I guess I'm not sure what it's called, but it's not binocular vision. They're not looking to gauge distance. They're looking to just be alert and to see if there's any risks around them, any things that they should be alarmed about. So that's the eye sockets on a carnivore facing forward. The teeth are all typically sharp. And there's another thing I want to talk about, and that is something I didn't even cover last time with skulls, and it's called the sagittal crest right here. So you can see how thick it is on this wolf skull. If you have any dogs in your own home, you might be able to feel this little knobby bit here on the back of their skull. What that is, it's a place for muscle, jaw muscle, to anchor onto the skull, and it gives the predator a more powerful bite. So you can see where the eye goes, and remember how I covered up all this area before? Now let's go the opposite way. If I cover up the eye socket, you see that great big area, that hole there on the side? This would all be filled in with muscle, and the muscle needs a point to be anchored so that it can be really big and also really strong. Animals that have a large sagittal crest typically have an even bigger muscle base right here, and all that would come underneath this cheekbone here where my finger is, and it would attach then onto the bottom jaw and into a little bit of the top jaw as well, and that gives them a more powerful bite. So that's something also to remember with predators, with carnivores, is their sagittal crest that runs along their top of their skull. So that's what I have to offer as far as carnivore skulls go. Let me move now into herbivore skulls. You guys might have noticed the book that I set here. This is perhaps my favorite book to read to students at Moss. It's called the Skull Alphabet Book, and it's for pretty young kids, but it has some really interesting skulls in there that I think could be applicable for older students to look at as well. I'll show you guys a couple pages out of that here in a moment. I have here a deer skull. Specifically, I have a white-tailed deer skull, something that was donated to Moss, which is really lovely that folks are willing to do that. On the deer, it is, of course, an herbivore skull, and it's going to have very different teeth because it's an herbivore. Let me show y'all what that's going to look like. Unfortunately, I don't have incisors on this skull. I just have the molars, but the molars are really important and really indicative as to it being an herbivore. Let's check it out. So we did a side view of the carnivore teeth. Let's do a side view of the herbivore teeth. You can see they're not nearly as pointed. They are a little bit more worn down. They're still sharp in spots. You can see this one right here. Let's see if I can get that to focus. There we go. You can see this one right here. There is a bit of a point right through there. But that's not necessarily going to mean that it's a carnivore, because if you look at the bottom of the teeth now, do you see how there's all these grooves in here? This gives these teeth their grinding power. Essentially, imagine it this way. If you're an animal, you spend your life chewing on vegetation, you have to really break it down first in your mouth. You need to have the tools to grind those the plants down for a long time. If you've ever seen cows chewing their cud, that is what a cow is doing. It's regurgitated some of its food, its plant materials that it ate, and it's working on breaking them down further. So you need really wide, really big teeth with a lot of grooves through here. Furthermore, this set of teeth here, it is a little sharp still, but as this deer would have grown older, these teeth would have worn down. So the teeth start off with lots of edges, lots of points, lots of sharp bits, but that's because over the course of its life, those edges are going to wear down, and it still needs to be able to chew adequately. It still needs to be able to have a really strong tooth base in which it's going to be chewing its food. All these grooves through here. Check those out. Let's take a look at the back of the skull. Remember how I said earlier there is a sagittal crest on carnivore skulls? You can see here on this herbivore skull, oops, sorry everyone, there is no crest back here. It's a pretty flat back to the skull. There's a little bit of a bump right here, but that's not necessarily going to be related to its chewing power. In the same way how we saw in the carnivore skull, maybe I'll pull it out again so we can do a comparison, how the muscle would have come from the back edge. Oh, sorry everybody. I have a hard time with my camera. Here we go. So on the same way how that muscle on the carnivore would have come back here and gone through this arch, you can see that the space for this arch is a lot smaller on this deer, meaning it doesn't need such a powerful bite in order to eat what it needs to eat to survive. So, I'm going to the eye sockets again. You can see, if we look straight down this deer skull, those eye sockets are no longer facing forward, they're facing sideways and outward. So again, if its eyes are in the front, it likes to hunt. If the eyes are on the side, it likes to hide, which means that for this herbivore, it's looking for those predators, it's looking for things to be alarmed about. Because its eyes are on the sides more so, it can have some degree of looking behind itself. It's not a perfect 360 degrees of being able to see things, but it is bigger than, say, our eyes. We probably have a little bit more than 180 degrees, maybe just under 180 degrees, but a deer would have a lot more of a bigger range. It could see around itself a lot more. I wanted to show you guys a specimen that Moss has that's really cool. So again, it's going to be a cast of a skull, or I'm sorry, it's going to be a cast of a tooth actually. It's not real, but it does show those grooves that herbivores need. So back in an Ice Age time period, North America had lots of mammoths, and mammoths were herbivores, and I have here a cast of a mammoth tooth. Let me back that up a little bit so you guys can see. So this is the whole tooth. Some of this would have been in the jaw, pretty much from everything where my hand is down is where it would have been in the jaw itself. And then this top portion is what would have been exposed to the surface for it to actually use it to chew. But you can see those grooves again. These are the grooves. And when it was young, it probably would have been a little bit sharper, a little bit more pointed on the edges. We can see some of those points right there. And then as it got older, those grooves, those points wore down, but it still has the chewing power it needs to grind plants down. I see somebody asking a question. Black stuff. I'm not sure if you mean this here. This is a replica of a mammoth tooth. It's a cast. This black stuff is meant to kind of mimic its fossilization. Mammoth tooths are often fossilized, and so we tend to see that they are turned into a different mineral. Oh, I see. Thank you for being specific. The black lines on top of the skull. I'll pull out that deer skull again and show you guys those lines. If you remember, I mentioned last time how skulls are made up of many, many bones. When animals are born, when people are born, our skull has many, many different parts to it, many bones, and they're not fused together. On this deer skull, this is a really good example of the bones as it grew older fusing together. It makes the skull stronger. It makes it so that it's going to be more protected in the brain area, and it's a really good specimen on this deer skull. All those fissures and cracks, and you can see where they fused together as this deer got older. Last time I showed the bobcat skull did not quite have this good of lines on it. I hope that answers your questions there, folks. Let's see. So that is about everything I have for you. I have just one more mention. We've talked about carnivores, we've talked about herbivores, but we also have something in between the two, and that's an omnivore. We as people are omnivores, and omnivores are capable of eating both meat and vegetables, plants. I have here a cast of a grizzly bear skull, and it's pretty massive. Let me show you guys. So this is my grizzly bear cast replica. Again, this really did show what a real grizzly bear once looked like in life. So there really was a grizzly bear, really did have a skull that looked like this. They made a replica of it. There's a company out there that does a lot of that. And then educational departments like us can get a chance to show students what it looks like. I want to show you guys specifically with the omnivore, though, its teeth. Bears will eat all kinds of goodies. They'll eat I suppose they'll eat anything that they can scavenge. If it's like an elk or a deer that's died, they will also hunt them if they can. They'll steal things from other predators. They will also eat berries and plants and roots. And they'll also eat plenty of fish. And I suppose if they could catch a bird, they would probably eat a bird too. I'm not sure if that's really a common practice amongst bears. But in the teeth, we can see how it's an omnivore. The incisors, again, they're broken, and I apologize for that, but we would see the incisors look pretty much the same way we've seen them already, somewhere between an herbivore and a carnivore. The carnivore has super sharp incisors. This guy would probably have not quite as sharp incisors so that he can snip at different plants. On the teeth, the canines are super sharp again, but the molars is what it comes down to. They look quite a bit like our molars. They're not as sharp or as tall as, say, that wolf's molars, and they still have all those grooves to chew plants up, but they are still a little bit tall. They still have some of the mountainous look to them. So I want to show you guys that as well. I think that's about everything I have for you today. Again, we do our live feeds every Wednesday and every Friday, so at 11 o'clock, so if you want to get on Facebook and take a look at that. We also upload all of our previous live streams from other days. Once again, this is one of my favorite books to read. If you are as excited about skulls as I am, this is the Skull Alphabet book, and it's a wonderful picture book with various skulls in it, and it's actually quite fun because there's not only skulls of all kinds of creatures from across the world, but you have to guess what it is. The answers are, of course, in the back, but that's no fun to look at the answers first. There's also what they call little Easter eggs of various faces of presidents throughout American history. So this is a fun book to kind of bring home if you would like. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you on Friday, 11 o'clock for our next live feed. See you later.